Good afternoon. Welcome to City Council meeting for October 11th, 2022. Items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. Two or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. I will call the meeting to order, and Madam City Clerk, we have a confirmation of the posting of the agenda and the roll call.
Yes, thank you. The agenda was posted in accordance with open meeting law, and all members are present.
Thank you. And we'll begin with the invocation. We have Deacon Tim O'Callahan with St. Andrew's Church this evening. Thank you.
Let us pray. God of all creation, we thank you for this day and the many blessings we have received. We thank you for the people with whom we have been in contact with, our family, friends, and strangers. We thank you for the ability to use our minds to discern your will and work to create a strong and healthy community. We thank you for our community and for all who serve it, for those who teach, for those who protect, for those who clean and those who repair, for those who work in parks and those who work on the roads, for those who plan and those who make plans happen, for those who heal and those who counsel, for those who govern and those who elect, for all who live into the best example of what it means to be a citizen. We thank you for our community of Boulder City. We pray for all in our community who are hungry, unemployed, or uninsured. We pray for all in our community who are mentally or physically ill. We pray for all in our community who live in violence. For these and all the burdens of a larger community, Lord, hear our prayers. As this meeting begins this evening, I pray for each person here, especially the members of the City Council. Give each council person clarity of mind, creativity, compassion, due diligence, integrity, and a sense of humor. Give them listening ears and thoughtful words. Give them presence of mind and an open heart. And all God's people said, Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Deacon. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you, Deacon O'Callahan, for those words. Madam City Clerk, do we have public announcements?
Yes, 2 people signed up for public announcements.
Those people who had signed up for public announcements, if you'd like to come forward at this time. Just kidding. All right. We will then move to our initial public comment period. Public comment at this time must be on an agenda item for action. Each person will have up to 5 minutes to speak. And as always, we ask that those speaking be civil and concise in their comments. Is there anyone who would wish to speak in the initial public comment? Mr. Hantz, please come forward. State your name, and also there should be a sheet there on the podium. You can record your name.
Yeah, I signed the one outside that said I had that was the wrong one.
Lots of forms.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see, this is agenda number 11. Okay, got the wrong hat. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to express my opinion regarding agenda item number 11. I must disclose that I'm a member of the Boulder City Historic Preservation Committee, but the opinions expressed here are mine alone. I recently appeared before the Planning Commission and expressed my view that the Nevada Revised Statutes require that any city that has a historic preservation ordinance must actually attempt to preserve its historic buildings. That assertion fell on deaf ears, and the Commission made it quite clear that they have no intent interest in having an ordinance that actually requires preservation of Boulder City's historic buildings. But I'm here this evening to once again make the case for an ordinance that requires property owners to preserve their historic buildings. However, I'm not going to resort to quoting any Nevada revised statutes because it seems that no one pays any attention to them anyway. But while researching the history of the preservation effort in this city, I came across a couple of interesting items. From a Boulder City News editorial, it was dated June 2006, commenting on the proposed 2006 Historic Preservation Ordinance, which is essentially the current ordinance, okay? And I quote from this. This is the editorial. The result of a historic preservation ordinance, the result is a historic preservation ordinance that preserves nothing historic. Its strongest measure is to allow, not even require, a month-long delay to complete a historical record before a house is in a historic district is demolished. The editorial goes on to say, and I quote, "City council members have argued that they cannot infringe upon property rights by passing a historic preservation ordinance with teeth instead of gums." And I quote, "The fact is, that is what municipal governments do. They create zoning that limits what property owners may and may not build in certain areas. They pass building and safety codes that require owners to meet certain standards in the construction of their private property. They even pass nuisance ordinances that regulate how property is kept up." And then to finish the quote, "If Boulder City," this is 2006, "wants to claim the mantle of historic preservation of an historic preservation area, it needs to pass an ordinance that preserves history." That ends the quotes. And by the way, these are my sentiments exactly. But also from a Boulder City News article about a week later than the one I just referenced, that was reporting on the city council meeting that adopted the current ordinance, again quoting the article, which claims to quote the following statements from Councilman Roger Tobler. I'm quoting a quote, okay? "I think we've proven that we think it's important." No, wait a minute, I keep doing that wrong. "I think we've proven that we think it's important with our past record." I can leave the word out. "I don't think we've proven that we think it's," that is the historic preservation, "important with our past record." I'll say that one more time and get it right. "I don't think we've proven that we think it's important with our past record. I think I understand," this is again quoting, "I think I understand a lot of people have given up. This ordinance does not go far enough. I think we're all in agreement with that." Councilwoman Andrea Anderson added, "We expect to hear from you," that is the community. "We expect you to strengthen this." City Manager Vicki Mays is quoted as saying, quote, "We see the historic district as a huge asset and of incredible value to the city. While this ordinance certainly can't fix that we've gone 30 years without action, I think it's the beginning of an educational effort to have kind of a citizen-based program that does promote preservation in the community." That ordinance was passed unanimously. And I would suggest that, does this sound familiar to you? To me, the current arguments sound like deja vu all over again. So here we are. The city has now gone 40 years without any effective ordinance that preserves the historic character of the district. a district that was defined as historic by inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places in 1983. In that time, we have lost significantly more than half of the historic buildings that qualified as contributing to the historic district, character of the district.
Mr. Hans, could you
I'm on my
conclude?
last sentence,
All right,
Mayor.
thank you.
I firmly believe it is well past time for a, quote, educational effort to promote historic preservation. It is time to approve an ordinance that actually requires the preservation of historic buildings within the district. And not only should the ordinance pass, it should be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Mr. Goya? Again, if you would state your name and record your name, please.
Hi, my name is Alan Goya. I live at 413 Utah Street, and that's in the Historic District. And I was a member of the Historic Preservation Committee. And I just like to say it like three basic things. But first of all, congratulations for getting it this far. And this is really important. We've been working, mayor, council, staff. You guys have all been working very hard on this, and the committee. They've all been working very hard on this. And I think it's really important that we pass something. And, you know, whatever we pass, I feel, has to be a consensus. What we don't want to happen is the same thing that happened in 2007, where a ordinance was adopted and then changed almost immediately, and we have the ordinance we have today. So I think the idea of compromise and how can we work and make something work for us. And the second point I have, so, you know, good luck, and I hope that, you know, we can come to consensus or a compromise or whatever we need to do to get some kind of ordinance done. Because there's other areas in town that we have to look at, such as Nevada Parkway, where we're gonna build a new train museum, where there's buildings there, we should make that a new historic district, but we need to get this basic framework worked. Second, maybe there are other ways, and I have two possible solutions, and one of the things I always think about is what problem are we solving? And I can offer two solutions for two specific problems that came into the past. One was the destruction of the old hospital, which, you know, some people say it was the city council voted for. But what happened was, you know, basically it was a historic building and had 45-day demolition permit. Perhaps one alternative is all contributing buildings in the historic district could be determined as historically significant and maybe have a 6-month demolition period. So if somebody buys that property, there is a time to find an alternative buyer or an alternative use. 45 days in our current ordinance is not sufficient time to make that kind of negotiation or change. The second other item I'd like to talk about is maybe, you know, items like zoning in specific neighborhoods under specific neighborhood guidelines, such as the tree street, like an ash. How do we prevent something like 2-story buildings being constructed in that neighborhood? And with the land prices today, it's more and more going to be desirable to, as these small houses come on the market and they become older and more expensive lots, to raise those houses and make 2-story McMansions. And there's nothing in our ordinance right now to prevent that. But perhaps that we can, you know, just restrict at least the levels of houses in selected neighborhoods, depending on neighborhood guidelines. That was it. The third thing I'd like to mention is that about 30 years ago, there was a lot of work done on historic preservation, brought up by people like Dennis McBride, Paul and Barbara Adams. Anyway, that came about because reclamation was going to take out the lawn and turn it to zero scale. We're still in the drought 30 years ago, but a compromise happened. We still have the lawn. And today, reclamation is talking about tearing out that lawn again. But to me, that is the most historic piece of Boulder City property. It was the first thing that was planted in this community was the lawn by reclamation. And that kind of was spurred a lot of historic preservation movement in this town. And that is, you know, one of the most historic, probably the first public lawn in southern Nevada history was that lawn up there. And the community spent their first 3 Thanksgivings cooling off in the lawn. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Good work, and I wish you guys luck, and I want you to pass something, but I want you to pass something that lasts. You know, no matter who who's on the council, that the whole community can be proud of. So thank you very much for your work and effort.
Thank you, Mr. Goya. Anyone else wishing to speak? Please come forward. And again, if you would state your name and record your name.
Sure. I don't know where the recording sheet went, but I did sign it outside.
I believe we'll have to get Mr. Goya to
Okay.
bring that back.
I took both of them. Yeah, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
left the pen though.
Okay. My name is Bryn, and I live at 660 Avenue F. And I was at the Planning Commission meeting too, and said there, and will say here, thank you all for your work, hearing us out, working on this ordinance for the past, I think you had cited 4 decades, which is slightly longer than I've been alive, which is amazing. But so I agree with the former commenter. I don't want to see something passed that'll immediately get shot down, and we start from square one and then go through this whole argument again in 2 years, and then again in 2 years. So with that in mind, I've already voiced a lot of my major concerns. I've emailed you all. I've talked to a few of you. I've met with the city about my own house. My husband and I just moved in last July, and we're actually looking to remodel it in a historic way, both the interior and the exterior. So just one minor comment that I had made, it would be helpful to get some interior recommendations and guidelines, because I've been struggling with those right now, which is what I'm currently working on. But as far as this ordinance goes, the purpose section of it doesn't really match its actual text, which is one of my major concerns. It's not really representative of what it entails. It cites tourism as an incentive, but it seems to target the residential community. And I see people from out of town on my block maybe once a year, and that was last weekend for Art in the Park. And neighbors all came out the night before to weed and make it look nice and pick up trash. So I think people there do want to put their best foot forward and show us off as a good community. But things like the fines of $500 a day and misdemeanors, and it looks like in there possible repossession of a house as a last measure. That's all really scary, and it's something my husband and I went through before in our last city, where we were stuck with no other option but to just abandon our house when we tried to save it. And it's actually slated for demolition right now, which is sad to everybody. But one concern is in this ordinance versus the text I've seen from the Boulder City History and Arts Council when they're pushing for it. They're saying we need to get to 51% contributing houses, and we're at 43. But there's actually no tangible metrics in the ordinance to do that. Instead, the ordinance seems to police people for what already exists. But there's nothing there to get us up to that 51% contributing, which is a concern to me, because that is something we would like to do, bring our house back to somewhat of its historic fashion. Like I said, both inside and out. I think the inside's important too, even though I know it's not covered under this ordinance. But one of my major concerns was a lot of my neighbors couldn't be here tonight. They can't get off work. They can't take a night shift off to attend this. They couldn't for the last one either. And a lot of them found out about it at the last minute from me telling them. I don't think they're as connected, and I try to be, but one major concern is there are needs and there are wants. And I see housing and our residential district, that's the shelter over our families' heads. That's a need. As much as I like historic preservation myself, I see it as a want and something we should work toward and work with that community, do outreach to them for those properties like mine. I just moved in. A lot of people moved in last year. Mine's rated in fair condition, and retrievable, which means it could be brought back to contributing status. That's something I would love to do, but not with the text of this ordinance, which is just frightening to me personally. And then also in the Planning Commission's commentary, a couple people said, well, it's my house, I'll do what I want. Fair enough, and I believe those people when they say it. When I hear my own neighbors echo the same, and this summer I heard one of their air conditioners grind to a halt, and they haven't been able to fix it since because they don't have money to. When they say that, I read between the lines to say, we're just trying to get by, and all of this is just as terrifying to them. So I think the same words are being uttered by this different people with different context, which is a real concern for me. For me, being from Washington, D.C., where historic preservation has run rampantly out of control there. It is pushing low-income people out of those neighborhoods. They're designating new historic districts left and right. And you can see the demographics and how it changes. It pushes people out of the homes that they own because they can't afford to maintain them to those standards. So that's a big concern of mine. I don't want any of my neighbors who I've gotten to know over the last year and several months being pushed out of their house because they can't necessarily afford to do all of that work at once. And we've even had the same problem with ours through our second monsoon season now. I've watched our original eaves rot, and we can't find a contractor in this city. There's so few and far between. It's so hard to get work done. We don't have HVAC in our own home yet. That's been in the works since February. Hopefully
If you
done
could
soon. Yeah, okay.
conclude, please.
Sure, but yeah, so I live in the dingbat homes, which were originally intended as temporary tract housing, and I think it's pretty incredible that people have done as much as they've done so far to make them stand for 91 years. So, and I see them out at 6 a.m. sweeping their driveways. I think people are trying as hard as they can. We already lack affordable housing. There are some places around. Nevada Way was mentioned, that Flamingo Inn and Motel could be repurposed. There's an apartment building at Nevada and New Mexico I don't know who owns. Looks kind of dilapidated. It looks like they're fixing it up. There's a lot of potential for affordable housing there, but I think taking away affordable housing in the name of historic preservation, which I see as a want, something I want to do, I think it's the wrong way to go about it, and I don't think it'll be sustainable. So.
Thank you.
That's my comment. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, anyone wishing to call in may do so at this time. The phone number 702-589-9629. Again, this is the initial public comment period for the city council meeting. Anyone wishing to call in, the phone number is 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Yes, I'd like to comment.
Go ahead.
This is Judy DeShane, and I was going through some stuff, and I happened to remember I was at, and I know on the agenda tonight, I think it's item 12, that there's an update on the strategic plan. And when they initially put together that strategic plan back in 2018, there were 5 council members, you know, counting the mayor, who was Mayor Woodbury at the time. And they all approved, you know, doing this historic preservation and updating the ordinance. In all the times, which really has only been about 4 years, 5 years, we have had 11 different council people. There has been a report every quarter on the strategic plan, and no one has ever objected. No one on the council out of 11 people has ever objected to the doing something with the ordinance so that it has some teeth in it. So now we're at this point, and people are saying, no, we can't do that because we might step on someone's toes. Well, that is absolutely the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. And at the Planning Commission, one guy actually said he was going to do what the hell he wanted to, and to hell with anything else, because he was better than the rest of us. Now, that's not fair, and it's not right, and this council should pass this ordinance and have it, put some teeth in it, and make it stick. It's about time that we do something positive for our community. And it's not, I looked at homes in the historic district when I first moved here. I can't remember what avenue it was on, but it was on one of the letter avenues. And I was amazed at the shoddy workmanship that was done. And so we really need to put this in and have some continuity to it and have this for everybody. And the people that are currently non-conforming do not have to conform to anything according to this ordinance. And for looking at bringing something back, the company store on the corner of Nevada and Avenue B, I think it is. I can't remember the avenue. But that was totally different when I moved here. It was purchased by the lady that owns it now. She spent a great deal of time and effort redoing that so that whole corner looks like it did way back when. And it's great. I think she did a terrific job. And she did that on her own dime. It was not the $100,000 that we give to people now that have business properties and are repurposing them. So I really want to see this pass. I think it's time. It's the quote that Charles read is telling too, that this has been in the works forever. But what they finally did in 2008 was dumb it down to the point where it really did no good at all. So thank you for listening, and I hope you guys vote for this and pass it. We need it. Thank you.
Thank you. The phone line's available now. Anyone wishing to call in, the number 702-589-9629. Again, anyone wishing to call in, the number 702-589-9629.
Public comment.
Hello.
Hi. This is public comment.
Hi. I would like to make a public comment, please.
Okay, if you can state your name for the record.
Beth Aldworth Miller.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to say my husband and I live at 426 Birch Street, and we are in support of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, as I know many of our neighbors are, to continue to maintain the character of this historic area.
Hello.
Do you have any further comments?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I see that, I'm hearing now that my recorded message is being played.
No, that's you. It's, if you turn down the volume in the back, there were like 20
Oh.
second delay.
Okay. All righty, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to call? The phone line's available, 702-589-9629. Anyone wishing to call for the initial public comment period, the phone number 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there emails received?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
First comment was submitted by Linda Brown. I am asking the City Council to adopt the proposed historic preservation ordinance. Please, let's protect what's left of our history here in Boulder City. We are a unique city in all of America due to our history. I urge you to vote to protect our city and our history. I was devastated at the destruction of our beautiful hospital. Tragic. Thanking you in advance. Next comment was submitted by Judith Hoskins. Thank you, Mayor and council members, for allowing me to submit my remarks on agenda item number 11, Bill 1921, Historic Preservation. I support the proposed amendment to Title 11 of the City Code. I have remarked on this issue at several public meetings, so I will be short on my input. All of the council members ran their campaigns supporting historic preservation. Tonight is the night we will learn if all the council members will uphold their promises to the voters. Former council member. Next comment is from Ann Langevin. I am part owner of 400 Ash Street, which is a contributing property in the Historic Preservation District. I am opposed to the proposed draft Historic Preservation Ordinance. The proposed ordinance has broad enforcement provisions with heavy consequences for noncompliance. Many of us in Boulder City appreciate the individual character of our town. Its homes are unique and add to the charm of Boulder City, but they are old. They were constructed 90 years ago with lead pipes, lathe and plaster walls, and hung sash windows. Parts are not available. Carpenter ants invade wood frame homes. Our homes are expensive to maintain. Your definition of ordinary maintenance may not be the same as my definition of ordinary maintenance. Our idea of architectural significance may also differ. A penalty of $500 each day for noncompliance to what is essentially a subjective standard is prohibitive. It's interesting that not one of the members of council nor the mayor lives in the historic preservation area, yet you are proposing onerous regulations and substantial penalties for the homeowners who do. We would not have purchased our homes if we did not cherish them. Instead of penalizing homeowners in the historic preservation area, isn't it more reasonable to offer incentives to help them maintain their homes? Next comment was provided by Judy Anderson. To whom it may concern, I'm writing this in response to the proposed historic preservation ordinance. I realize Boulder City cannot afford to lose these historical properties, but when I hear words like a commission to oversee compliance, establish fines and penalties for enforcement, and misdemeanor violations each day, this should be called what it is. It is a homeowners association. I moved here and bought my house in historic Boulder City because I wanted a cute old house and no association. This proposed ordinance gives too much control to the city and a chosen few on a commission to tell me what I can and cannot do with my house. New people moving here won't buy homes in the historic area if they know it's a hassle to change anything. These homes will become less valuable. I am a contributing property and will remain that. I, like most of my neighbors, keep our houses and yards looking nice, and whatever improvements we make to our homes are for our comfort and to make our home look nicer. We do not need other people to make those decisions for us and lose our individual property rights. And we are the ones who bought the home and are paying for this home. Maybe some laws for historic commercial buildings and not private homes might work better. Also, it is not fair that those of us who already own homes would now have to be under new rules and regulations that weren't there when we bought our house. We would have to be grandfathered in under new changes. I do not want a homeowners association, and that's exactly what this is. I say a big no to the proposed preservation ordinance. Next comment was submitted by Dr. Valerie McNay. I support the proposed historic preservation ordinance and hope city council members will too. I read the comprehensive 17-page draft historic preservation ordinance and appreciate the 2 years of discussion and work by the ad hoc Historic Preservation Committee consisting of 2 Historic Preservation Committee members and 2 City Council members in the creation of this ordinance. I believe the city staff, City Council, and Historic Preservation Committee have been doing a good job at preserving historic structures in Boulder City, but clearly need to do better as historic resources have declined from 82% to 42%, which is below the minimum threshold required for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. I do not live in the historic district, but I know many Boulder Cityites who do, and most attended the Historic Preservation Day and informative activities, including the proposed changes in the ordinance from voluntary to mandatory and enforceable preservation features, which apply in a fair and sensible way to the front of properties. Most appeared supportive of the new proposed historic preservation ordinance. The 2 new historic preservation grant funds, including residential $100,000 with up to $10,000 per project, demonstrates the support the city has been doing to help with historic preservation in Boulder City. Please support the proposed historic preservation ordinance. The next public comment was provided by Fred Volz. Given the extreme emergency faced in southern Nevada regarding our steadily declining water supply, it is hoped that the CCSD representative will address the district's plans for fully removing its water-guzzling grass at Boulder City facilities, including on athletic fields, and replacing it with xeriscape or artificial grass. The city needs to ramp up similar efforts for its own excessive water use at city-operated facilities much more quickly, mirroring the 22 virus response, since halving our water usage is just as important as an effort on virus control. After the Planning Commission's deliberations on August 31st concerning the Historical Preservation Ordinance of Agenda Item 11B, there have been considerable community discussion about the content and wisdom of this ordinance. What makes Boulder City unique from most other suburban communities is its original planned community look and feel generated by historic properties. The indifference, destruction of these properties over the years, including the original hospital complex, has been a loss to this community that needs to stop. The look and feel of Boulder City attract tourists who otherwise have few reasons to spend any time or money in the community. Some have said the proposed rules and fines are onerous. The property values of these structures are material higher than other parts of Boulder City on a per square foot basis. Property ownership comes with rights, but also responsibilities, such as trash management, maintenance of property exteriors, and seeking approval for changes that require building permits. Some have claimed that restrictions and guidelines for modifications will overwhelm the average property owner. That claim treats property owners as though they are cretins. It also dismisses the ability of property owners to make their own decisions and follow rules. Is anything different when people with income must comply with the Internal Revenue's tax code, no matter how convoluted it might be? None of us relish paying taxes, but we have no choice in the matter if government services are to be provided to a given community. Hopefully, community development has made a good faith effort to lessen some of the more excessive fines and restrictions identified by those who want little to no regulation. Changes from the original ordinance proposal have not been itemized or otherwise identified for ease of comparison in the agenda packet, which would have been helpful to all of those interested in the issue. If any of the ordinance's provisions need further modification once implemented because they do not work equitably, the expectation is community development, the city manager, and ultimately a future city council will take appropriate action. We need the proposed historical preservation ordinance implemented without further delay. Similar protracted delays have afflicted the city's own minimal water conservation efforts at parks, athletic fields, and the municipal pool, an enforceable leash law, and a respectable dog park operated by the city for its canine and human residents. The entire community suffers when clear public policy decisions are not timely. Next comment was provided by Grant Turner. My name is Grant Turner, and I'm a longtime resident within the Historic District. In the last week, I reached out to 8 of my neighbors on Denver Street and asked them if they were aware of the proposed changes to the Historic District. 5 were either vaguely familiar or entirely unaware of any proposed changes. All 8, 9 including myself, shared a common sentiment. We are all generally in favor of historic preservation, but opposed to the city restricting property rights without our approval and despite our objections. Does the city know what percentage of Historic District residents approve of or are even aware of the proposed changes? Did the city do outreach, gather data, take a poll, canvass the neighbors? Did they ask residents of the Historic District if they are in favor of the city having the power to levy $500 a day fines on them? Setting aside the obvious issues presented by the proposed ordinance, such as discrimination, potential lawsuits to the city, or the fact that the ordinance would further complicate an already cumbersome or broken building permit process. The larger point is that the city did not adequately inform the residents of the Historic District, and they did not ask for their approval. The proposed changes are being made in large by part who are not members of the Historic District, would be enforced by people who are not members of the Historic District, and they are doing so without the consent of the members of the Historic District. I would also advise the city to rethink the ordinance altogether, maybe make it optional, somehow incentivize participation, provide some benefit to property owners who sign up. The ordinance as it is proposed is all stick, no carrot, and nobody asked for our consent. Thank you for your consideration. The final public comment was submitted by Nicola Collins. I hope you will support the proposed historic preservation ordinance while we still have a historic district to preserve. Voluntary preservation has been a failure, as we can see from the dramatic decline in contributing properties. As a proud homeowner in the historic district, this ordinance will help protect my property value and prevent someone from building a McMansion next door. We have already seen what will happen to our historic district without these protections at the top of Ash Street. Our history is what makes our town unique and underpins our tourist economy. More importantly, the historic district is our last tangible connection with the people who came here in desperate times and built one of the wonders of all engineering world. We have a story to tell. We should protect it.
Thank you. All right. We will close the initial public comment period then and move to approval of the regular agenda. Any changes, Madam City Clerk, for the regular agenda?
No changes.
Madam City Attorney
No changes.
and Mr. City Manager?
No changes.
Council members, any changes for the regular agenda?
No changes.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to make a motion for approval?
I move that we approve the regular agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? For the consent agenda, again, any changes, Madam City Clerk,
No changes.
Madam City Attorney,
No changes.
and Mr. City Manager?
No changes.
Thank you. Council members, any changes for the consent agenda?
No changes.
Mayor? I would like to ask that we move agenda item number 4 to the regular agenda for purposes of proper disclosure.
Thank you. Any other changes? Councilmember Adams, would you like to make a motion then?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with moving consent agenda item number 4 to the regular agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. That will then bring us to item number 4. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, thank you. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose a conflict of interest. The matter before this body is an application for a grant from the Damn Short Film Festival. My spouse was formerly the executive director of the Damn Short Film Festival, and while she continues to volunteer for the organization, she is no longer under their employment. As such, I have no commitment in a private capacity to this organization as that term is defined by NRS 281A.065. Accordingly, I conclude that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would not be materially affected by this relationship, and I will be participating in voting on this matter.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding item number 4? Mr. City Manager, anything from staff that they wish to add?
This is just the special event promotion grant, just so the public's aware. It's in the amount of $5,000 for the Damn Short Film Society's annual Damn Short Film Festival event, and I have nothing else to add.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to make a motion then on Resolution 7525?
I move to pass resolution number 7525. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Item number 7, presentation by Dr. Jaskolski from Clark County School District. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor McManus, members of the board. Deanna Jaskolski, I proudly serve as the Region 3 Superintendent, and here with me this evening is Kelly Kowal-Paul, our Chief Strategy Officer, and she's going to start with an update on the reorganization.
Thank you, Dr. Jaskolski. Good evening, everybody. As you know, the reason that we are here, Dr. Jaskolski is here in front of you quarterly, is due to NRS 388G, which we refer to as the reorganization of the Clark County School District. I'm here to provide you an update with regard to the reorganization, some action that our Board of Trustees is taking, and how that will affect these quarterly presentations to you in the future. The School District Board of Trustees is considering a district regulation Thursday evening at the board meeting. That includes some requirements about information that is to be included in these quarterly reports, and there are 4 items. Number 1, any status of compliance with the law, NAC, or district regulation related to the reorganization. Number 2, student information aligned to the district strategic plan, disaggregated by municipality, will be provided as a reference material in advance of the presentation. Number 3, highlights and celebrations of schools, which is what I think you're used to receiving here in Boulder City. And then number 4, any information about investments made by the city in support of the district goals. What we anticipate is that items outside of those 4 topics would be routed electronically to the people who have the most knowledge in those areas. We find our experiences in some of the other municipalities where questions are being levied at the region superintendents, excuse me, for which the region superintendents are not adequately prepared to answer. So we route those to the right people, and we want to continue doing that. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that change would be happening in the future. It should feel very similar to what the presentations you've been receiving in the past, with the exception of the addition of a couple of pieces of information verbally, and then a whole lot of information in backup in terms of student achievement and things like that. So, Dr. Driskolski.
Thank you very much. I do have updates on the 4 remarkable schools here in Boulder City, starting with Mitchell Elementary School. Wanted to share that their parent-teacher conferences are underway this week, and a portion of those are going to be student-led, where their students are sharing their goals as part of the Leader in Me. Their fall MAP assessment, which is their interim assessment that's taken in the fall, the winter, and the spring, indicates that about 79% of Mitchell students are currently demonstrating proficiency in both reading and in mathematics. Mitchell Elementary School also had the most summer reading minutes in the Clark County School District during this past summer, and was recognized by the library district. And Boulder City Library helped tremendously as they allowed to visit the library during summer acceleration, where every student was able to receive a library card. Mitchell Elementary School is selected to host the Western Regional Leader in Me Symposium, and schools from all over the Western United States will have an opportunity to learn from Mitchell Elementary School and the remarkable work that they're doing in the Leader in Me. With Martha P. King Elementary School, they are very thankful to the Boulder Dam Credit Union and the Sunrise Rotary Club that donated $10,000 to start their science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which we call STEM lab. They purchased 2 3D printers, 3D pens, and programmable robots that will support the new computer science standards in their elementary school. They're gearing up, for the Halloween Spooktacular that will be coming, and are between King and Mitchell. Local businesses, community partners, and just so thankful to close off Avenue B for all traffic to allow the students to be able to walk safely on the sidewalk in the streets between the 2 schools. Volunteers, of course, from Boulder City High School and Garrett will run the carnival games and distribute food. And I believe I shared in the last presentation that this is the first year that King Elementary School has offered an intermediate autism program. And it's made a huge difference in the community for the students and for the families, so they don't have to go to other schools and into Henderson, so we can support our students here in Boulder City. And they're very thankful to have the staff and the resources for that to occur. Garrett Junior High School. They are focused on our Tier 1 instruction. So that is our standards-based instruction set forth by the state to provide high-quality instruction and intervention. They do meet weekly in what's called professional learning communities to talk about the students, the focus on the instruction, the standards, and how they're going to best support each and every individual student within the school, what their needs are, and any extra assistance that the students may need through those weekly meetings. There are also extra classes that I've identified for those students that may be in need of additional support through their core classes as well in our mathematics and our literacy. And of course, their goal is to accelerate their learning through that intense instruction to be able to meet their academic needs on grade level in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Every Friday, you may have heard that their student council has group games in the courtyard to bring just that fun and excitement into school in their beautiful, beautiful courtyard. Flag football is underway, which is a new sport to our to our middle schools, and they've been having a great time with that. They also wanted to share that they have several 7th and 8th grade students who start at the high school in the morning for Algebra 2 and Geometry for this past year. And they have several 6th graders in algebra. So it's amazing what they do in terms of their partnerships, and of course in the closeness of the schools to be able to support our students. I've shared about their STEM program as well, and that's up and running with robotics and 3D printing. And again, you can hear how the STEM is a theme throughout our elementary, middle, and going into our high school. Hope Squad for the social emotional component in the school is up and running as an early bird class. So students come before school to be a part of this. They are voted by their peers, so they are aware of what's happening with other students in the school, and if they need to refer a student to talk to an adult. They, of course, are not counselors, but they encourage students to talk to someone, and they check in as a peer support. They're in the courtyard when students arrive and have been trained to mingle and really make sure that no one is left alone, standing in the quad in the morning. The counselors are making sure that 15 families or 15 students are receiving food daily, and they're very thankful to the community that has donated lunch boxes and food for them to store. They have 8 students going to the honor choir, and as you saw, that the homecoming parade was so much fun with their Route 66 theme and involving all of the schools, and we very much appreciate that. Boulder City High School wanted to share just the energy on campus has been remarkable, and they have their core principles that have been guiding the community in regards to accountability, respect, integrity, and professionalism. And then their non-negotiables with personal electronics, respect, standard student attire, and language and readiness to ensure, again, that the expectations are very clear at the school and are providing support through those core values. They also did want to for me to share as well that they have been experiencing a high volume of absences and chronic absenteeism, and are really working very closely with the families in terms of support, that we know when our children are sick that we want them to be able to recover at home, but if our children are not sick, that they need to be in school. That's the best place for them to be able to learn, where we can best identify what their needs are and how to support them. So they're very thankful to the community for that support and are looking forward to that ongoing support in regards to attendance and chronic absenteeism as well. And to close out, I just want to thank Councilwoman Jorgensen for being a part of the interviews last week for School Associate Superintendent for the Clark County School District. We very much appreciate the time that you took out of your busy schedule to come and be a part of that. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I did have a question regarding, you had mentioned some of the testing proficiencies for the kids at the elementary schools. How is that in comparison to pre-pandemic levels? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so they have rebounded to be able to be on par with pre-pandemic levels.
I know that, I was at a panel discussion where that was brought up. Additional funding has gone into the district, and yet scores have decreased, and I thought, well, gee, that seems a bit unfair to be comparing people who had children out of class for a substantial period of time. Do you see that district-wide, or is that something here in Boulder City?
Yeah, so we've seen that at the elementary level here in Boulder City. We do have pockets around the district that we have seen a rebound, and we do have schools as well that are really focusing relentlessly on each individual student to provide that outcomes for them to continue to grow, because they have not rebounded as quickly.
All right. One of the things that we've done as a council is to make available some of the American Rescue Plan dollars that were provided to the city for efforts there at the school. I'm hoping we can get that in place to benefit the schools for those projects. I believe some of it was to go towards computer equipment, software, that sort of thing. That happens to be my background, so I think that is a very important thing for the kids. You mentioned the STEM programs that the Rotary Club has contributed to. With the upcoming year, I know one of the things that has occurred is with the free and reduced cost lunch program. All of that is going to continue as it has in the past, I'm assuming?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. Any other questions? Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes, thank you for coming. Thank you for the information. It's always nice. I had 4 children go through these schools, and it's nice to hear how they're continuing. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Boulder City, is it's a small town in a big county of school districts, so that's really nice. I guess a question that I have, and I'm pretty sure you're going to have to funnel this to the appropriate channels, which is just fine. Initially, I know that we were slated for a possibility of a K through 8 school, but that was taken off the agenda and tabled. But I still think that we stand in need of some upgrades to the current schools that we do have. I was wondering if that is slated to happen.
Yes, so I actually have an update. I spoke with our interim chief of facilities prior to coming, and our 4 schools here will be regularly assessed and modernized as needed. So we'll be able to provide updates on the assessment.
Do you know when those assessments will take place, where they fit on the schedule? Because I know there's like a 5-year schedule. I mean, does it fit near the end of the 5 years? Is it somewhere near the beginning?
That I don't have the information, but can provide that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Dr. Jaskowski, thank you, and good luck with the remainder of the school year.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, item number 8, presentation regarding Community Development Department Annual Report. Mr. Tedder?
Yes, Michael Mays, our Community Development Director, will be giving you an overview of all the wonderful things that he and his team and his department are doing. And take it away, Michael.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. So this is our annual opportunity to highlight accomplishments over the past year and what we are planning to work on over the next year. And so what I want to do is, as I've done before, highlight for you areas in the 5 responsibilities of community development. So there are 5 areas in which we support the city. First, through building permits and inspections, ensuring that quality development occurs within the community. Second is with respect to planning and zoning, reviewing development proposals, ensuring compliance with the city's zoning regulations and the city's master plan. Third is economic development, helping to support local businesses be successful within the community, principally through our economic development coordinator, Rafi Fasekjan. Fourth, through code enforcement, in responding to complaints on property maintenance concerns throughout the community. And then fifth, through historic preservation. And so starting with building permits and inspections, I want to highlight several things for you. Since the pandemic, how we conduct business has changed dramatically. And because of the limited exposure to the customers during that time period, what we had to do immediately is figure out ways to be able to review plans without receiving physical copies of those plans. And we, cobbled a process together that's been working since then. Council had approved with this year's fiscal budget the ability for us to purchase Bluebeam, which is a type of software that allows us to review plans, to distribute and circulate those plans among the various departments within the city, and to make comments on those plans. We will be implementing this within the next 6 weeks, and this is going to help even improve further the building permit process, because the prior clunky system that we've been working to process permits, we will now have a more streamlined one, which will make it easier for us to review and to provide comments back to the customer. Council also approved for this fiscal year the purchase of CityWorks. This is a permit processing software that first and foremost is going to allow the Community Development Department to communicate and coordinate with public works, utilities, and fire departments. We're all going to be using the same software. We're all going to be able to review things much more efficiently. And through the adoption of this software, it will further help improve the processing of building permits within Boulder City. Our plan is to begin the implementation within the next couple of months. It will be complete by June 30th because we will be switching over to CityWorks with the new fiscal year. One of the things that our building official, Nathan Ball, wanted to do is have a conversation with contractors within the community. And so we put together a contractors workshop. We invited all the contractors to a meeting at the end of August. And first we talked to them about some of the improvements we had done to the permitting process. We included representatives from fire, public works, utilities, departments as well. And then we highlighted some of the things we're planning to implement in the future, and then we listened to them. We asked them, how can we improve the process? And so with that feedback, we are now working to improve the permitting process throughout the departments and improve the turnaround times for permit reviews. We will continue that dialogue with contractors in the community. So this is not a one and done. And certainly we encourage them to reach out to us at any time because it shouldn't have to wait until a workshop to provide their feedback. But we will have regular conversations with contractors to share ideas and information and receive that feedback. We're also updating the department's website to make certain pages more user-friendly for our customers, easier to navigate. One of the things that we found is that the customers go to a certain web page and they're not sure, where to go next. And so we're hearing that feedback and responding to it. And then finally, in this area, as a result of that contractors workshop, the directors from the 4 departments, fire, public works, utility, and community development, are now meeting on a regular basis. Not only are we looking at the feedback we received from that workshop, but also looking at other ways that we can improve the permitting process throughout the organization, improve review times, improve coordination between departments' reviews to, again, achieve the ultimate goal of streamlining that process. This is something I share every year to just give the council and the community a sense of the number of building permits we process on an annual basis. And what's interesting, it is surprisingly consistent. You can see, going back to 2010, on average, we process around 550 building permits each year. Of course, the anomaly was in 2018. One of the metrics that we follow and review to gauge our performance is looking at the average review times for the initial submission to our department for a building permit. So we look on a quarterly basis and look at how many days on average it takes to review that permit and get comments out to the applicant. And so as you can see on the screen, we have a comparison of fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. And I'm very pleased to report to the council and the community there have been dramatic improvements in that review time for fiscal year 22 compared to fiscal year 21. And as you can see, significant reductions in the average review in days for that initial review. Moving on to planning and zoning. Some of the areas of responsibility here is ensuring the city complies with the growth control ordinance. This year, we engaged the Planning Commission and asked them, what type of training would you like to have to help you do your role and your service to the community? And so we've been conducting training workshops with the Planning Commission. The most recent one was research on tiny homes. Every community in Nevada has to implement an ordinance related to tiny homes by January 1 of 2024. And so we had a good training dialogue with them on that and best practices of how this has been implemented elsewhere. Obviously, community development block grant administration, this is an important function that our department provides. And then the landscape ordinance. We have engaged the community on their preferences with changes to the landscape ordinance. The next step in working with SNWA and the other jurisdictions is bringing a text amendment before the Planning Commission and City Council for consideration on proposed changes. This is a graph showing the number of allotments that the city issues every year. This is the number of residential occupancies that are provided. The green bar is the growth control ordinance maximum of 120 that can be issued each year. In the blue shows the actual number of allotments that were provided. And as you can see from this graph, the city is in full compliance with the growth control ordinance, and in fact, barely a quarter to a third of the total number of occupancies that are permitted have actually been issued in Boulder City on an annual basis. Moving on to economic development. The City Council adopted action items related to an economic development plan back in 2019. And so our economic development coordinator, Rafi Fasekjen, has been working very hard on implementing those action items. He also administers RDA grants and the special event grants for the department and for the community, and has in fiscal year 22 helped 301 businesses. This is an important role that he plays for supporting local businesses within the community, and it's one of the things that we measure in terms of our performance. Our department, with a partnership with the Chamber, held a job fair in April of this year and was well attended both by local businesses and prospective employees for those businesses. And so due to that success, we plan to hold another one in the future. Wanted to show the progress that our department is making on the economic development plan. In that plan, there were 20 strategies or action items, and they were put into 3 different categories: business retention, tourism, and economic sustainability. And as you can see from this graph, we are well on our way to completing them sooner than the 5-year time period, with 83% of the strategies under business retention completed, 40% for tourism completed, and 100% under economic sustainability. This is a graph that shows the dollars that were approved by the City Council for RDA grants on a fiscal year basis. And due to the efforts of our economic development coordinator and outreach to the business community about the availability of these grants, you can see in the prior 3 years an increase in their participation. We also have benefited from a continued low vacancy rate within Boulder City. This graph shows on a Q2 or second quarter basis for the last 5 years, the vacancy rate in Boulder City for office and retail compared to the Vegas Valley. And it has continued to remain low. What we see is that when businesses become vacant, interested parties quickly come along and purchase and or lease those. There's a lot of interest in opening businesses in Boulder City, and we want to continue to foster that. Moving on to code enforcement, another measure of our performance is tracking the percentage of cases closed within a fiscal year. And so as you can see in fiscal year 21, 95% of the cases were closed. In fiscal year 22, that was increased to 98%. On to historic preservation. So similar to economic development, the city last year adopted the Historic Preservation Plan, which has action items that our department is working on. And the Historic Preservation Ordinance, I'll be back here a little while later to be talking to you about that action item that was identified in the plan. What has been a tremendous help is the council's approval of the contract with Northwind that allows us to have the expertise and the resources to be able to engage property owners within the historic district so that they can better understand how to preserve their properties. And we've had great success in engaging with property owners, and particularly residential property owners, with the council-approved Residential Historic Preservation Grant. It has accomplished what has been needed for several years, is having that conversation with property owners very early on in the process, before they've hired an architect, before they've laid out their vision, to understand how to better preserve their properties within a historic district. And I'm also pleased to report that the city's application for the CCCHP grant has been tentatively approved. This is for the historic water filtration plant. The council approved $500,000 to help preserve the historic water filtration plant, and we will receive $200,000 in reimbursement from the CCCHP grant program to help in that effort. And so with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Questions or comments? Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes, Mr. Mays, thank you so much for sharing what you do. You do a wide variety of things over in your part of the city buildings. I was very excited to see building permits. I think when I was running, that was what everyone wanted to pull me aside and talk to me about, was kind of some of the inconsistencies and the hard times that they were having and the time limit. And I see that we haven't implemented the software, but I'm excited about that. And I appreciate your opening dialogue with actual contractors, so people who actually use the process can kind of talk to you about it and give you an idea. Because I think that's, if you're heard, sometimes it also helps your process. So thank you. And I look forward to the report on the improved time with the new software. I look forward to the information you'll bring forth. I saw under economic development that your tourism goals were only at about 40%. I guess my question for you would be, was this because of COVID, or what would be the reason for that being lower?
Basically, COVID did have an impact in the implementation of some of those goals. We looked at the goals and prioritized them in terms of the ability to accomplish those goals. And so, because that was a major factor, those are the things that we're going to be focusing on over the next year.
Okay, so increased focus on tourism to be able to accomplish that. And then lastly, you talked about the historic preservation kind of grant that we started and that you have had people. Could you give us an estimate about how many people have come forward and are interested in that help?
We have engaged owners of 40 properties within the district. And so what that has included is a lot of conversations with property owners, evaluating the current conditions of their properties and how to maintain those properties.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, first of all, I'm incredibly impressed and have been over the years at the quality of work of your department and the communications to us and with each other, and taking people's interests into consideration as a driving force, whether it's issues of turnaround time on permits and the accessibility of people, having accessibility to your department. I was wondering, was there ever a change in the Boulder City being added to the list of permitted cities when a contractor wants to get a license to do business in Boulder City? Apparently they can do all of them except for Boulder City on one document, and then they have to come here. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. So approximately 10 years ago, there was the opportunity for Boulder City to join with the other jurisdictions in a multi-jurisdictional contractor license. For various reasons, Boulder City did not join that group, and we have been discussing the potential of moving forward with that now, so that a contractor could go to any jurisdiction and register as a contractor in all the jurisdictions at once. One of the challenges has been with the software that they use and being able to add us to that, but we're still looking at that.
Okay, great. And also, why the anomaly of 2018 in terms of the, I'm looking for those charts now. Sorry.
Yeah, over 1,000 building permits.
Yes, all the building permits in 2018.
I'll give you a two-word response: solar and Gingerwood.
Ah, okay.
With Gingerwood, we are issuing individual permits for every one of the lots for electrical upgrades, and so that factored into that.
So are they individually upgrading the electrical, or is it part of a Gingerwood as a whole doing it, or?
The city was doing it, but community development was issuing individual permits for each one of those. So that's why that is out of line with all of the other average of roughly 550 permits each year.
Wonderful. Okay, just curious by that sudden jump. And I think that's it right now. I think that those are the only questions I had right now, and also a compliment on this, a focus on continuous improvement and how to best serve the community. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Fox?
Yeah, I just want to say great job on everything. The permit review, turnaround time, and the contractors workshop. That's a great idea. Do you know how many people or how many contractors came to the workshop?
We had approximately 12.
Nice. Okay. And it's an ongoing process. When's the next workshop?
You know, the feedback was, let's do it every 6 months, let's do it every year. So we're still evaluating that.
Okay.
But we are committed to continuing to have that dialogue with local contractors.
All right. Well, thank you and great job.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Kudos to you and your staff for all the hard work that you do. I know it is a lot. I'm just going to ask one question here because I think you really have covered just about everything here, but that is the Landscaping Ordinance. I think it was about this time last year. We talked about how it was going to come before us. It's something that, you know, I've been pretty passionate about, you know, and making sure that we have a design aesthetic throughout our community. Where are we at with that?
So you are correct. It was about this time last year, and we had hired Stantec to help facilitate preference surveys and engage the community to get feedback on appropriate landscaping. And then with the more recent regional challenges with water conservation, we had to step back and reevaluate. And it is important from SNWA's perspective that all the jurisdictions in Southern Nevada are on the same page as they are evaluating changes to landscaping ordinances. And so we're looking to them for guidance, and the goal will be to bring proposed changes to the Planning Commission and the City Council within the next several months.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I also want to comment on the improvements for the building permit process. I know that the number of people I've had contacting me has decreased, and that must be a good thing because they usually weren't calling with good news. You know, I think that the ability for people to do more of this online has certainly been an improvement and will continue to be that. The work that you personally have done on the historic preservation, but also city planner Susan Danielewicz. A lot of work has gone into things over the past year on that. the work that Mr. Fistection has done. I hear him being spoken of highly by some of the business owners here, that he's very accessible, he's got some great suggestions for people, and the fact that here in Boulder City, we have consistently had a lower vacancy rate of commercial properties than the Valley has, especially over the pandemic. I think that's been, speaks well of Boulder City and your staff to be able to fit people into the properties that are available. With the RDA, what is the approximate revenue that goes into that on a yearly basis?
I don't have that in front of me, but it's approximately between $500,000 and $700,000.
And do you know, have an estimation of what the current balance is in that fund?
It's been a while since I looked at it, approximately 1.7 to 2 million.
All right. You know, when you showed the goals that you had been working on, the tourism was at 40%. I do think there are a couple of things in that don't come out in those goals because the goals were not part of the strategic plan, but those are the EDA grants that have come through from the state, the economic development grants. We've had two major ones, is that correct? The Dark Skies project, and also whatever it is the Chamber of Commerce has planned down at the former Information Center.
Correct.
And those two totaled, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of more than $4 million between the two of them.
That is correct.
So that is significant, and you know, it's something that I've brought up before. I know some of the groups that I've been involved with, such as the Global Economic Alliance, the focus is moving not necessarily away from tourism. We understand how much of the economy in Southern Nevada has benefited from that, but to diversify the economy. And while tourism is a factor here in Boulder City for sure, I think that's something, and I know in speaking with you and Mr. Fistection that we're always looking. We can't necessarily attract a major data center here, although a couple of them have been interested in the past. But I think getting that diversification to our economy rather than a constant concentration on tourism does benefit our existing businesses like restaurants, other shops. If we have people here who have good jobs, diversified jobs, that is as much of a benefit as the tourism over the long run, and certainly tends to give more stability. So appreciate what you've done on that and the other endeavors. Any other comments?
Well, Mayor and members of the council, thank you very much for your kind words and feedback. I will be certain to convey those to the Community Development Department. I'm very proud at how hard they have worked over the past year accomplishing the community goals and serving our community. So thank you.
And I guess that does bring up one other thing. I know your staff has also been working very hard on getting information online, not just the how-tos of things, but making other information available to the community, whether it's via the building codes that are required, that type of thing. Again, compliments to you and the department on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 9 for possible action, consideration of bill number 1922. Mr. Tedder?
Thank you. Diane Pelletier, our finance director, will be handling this lease amendment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Agenda item number 9 is consideration of bill number 1922, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, approving agreement number 12-1418B between the City of Boulder City and Copper Mountain Energy to amend lease agreement 12-1418A to permit development of solar energy facilities and energy storage systems in lieu of a natural gas-fired peaker project for real property located at 751C El Dorado Valley Drive. This item was introduced at the last council meeting, and a little bit more information on it. The existing agreement permits the tenant to construct a gas-fired peaker plant to generate electricity for the utility. The amendment removes the gas-fired peaker plant provisions. The amendment adds the ability to install energy storage facilities. Other minor amendments to the lease references to the peaker plant infrastructure and related requirements are also made, and the amendment requires the tenant to remove all improvements upon expiration or early termination of the lease. So with that, we can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, sometimes something shows up and it just makes me smile. And for some reason, this makes me smile to think that, you know, they're wisely thinking about an alternative to a gas fire plant. And I know it's simply an option, and changing making an amendment to the document, which currently is their option to use it at some point. But the fact that energy companies are looking in that direction is pleasing. So I just want to make that comment about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with you and just follow that up with the fact that what I'm happy to see is an energy company found that the economics now work out, that they don't look for the option of developing a gas-fired plant, but have found that solar and energy storage is a profitable program or direction for them to go in. With that then, I will move for approval of Bill number 1922.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Ms. Pelletier. Item number 10, matters pertaining to the draft capital improvement plan. Mr. Tedder?
Again, Finance Director Pelletier will be walking you through the CIP, and this is also a two-part item, so you'll also be considering approval of the remaining $2 million of ARPA funds for the irrigation rehabilitation at the municipal golf course to help us achieve our water conservation efforts. And then we also have Carol Ellis, our CIP coordinator, here to answer questions. So, Diane?
Thank you. Last meeting, I said I would be bringing this item back, and just to allow the council members to have had time to review the information and see if they had any questions. So I'm bringing it back. I think we did add a little bit of information related to the utilities to the information given to the council, along with the executive summary. So as the city manager mentioned, resolution number 7528, we're asking for council to take action on that to approve $2 million of the American Rescue Plan Act funding to be used for water conservation, irrigation at the municipal golf course. So that's an action item, and other than that, we'll just be happy to answer any questions you have, and if there aren't any changes, we would be presenting this at the October 18th Citizen Workshop, all the information for the fiscal year 24 capital improvement program.
Thank you. Questions or comments? One question that I had brought up during my briefing yesterday. There are still some disparities in numbers between the executive summary booklet and some of the numbers that are found elsewhere in spreadsheets. You know, it would be nice if those numbers did add up. With regard to this particular action item for this evening, I also have made comment before about the amount of turf that will continue to remain at the municipal golf course, and the fact that here's another $2 million going into golf courses, and to either not have the amount of turf coming out of there that's possible to come out, and doing a lot of irrigation work, it seems like it may take us down the path of either having to go back and backtrack on this or redo some work that's being proposed in this. I hope that's not the case. I know that the city has been given direction from Southern Nevada Water Authority. We must reduce water use on the golf course, and wouldn't you know it, it's only going to cost us, I believe overall, several $1 million to be able to accomplish that.
That's correct, Mayor. And on the turf removal for the golf course, we will be planning with SNWA more turf removal. Currently, the system's on a 1970s block system, so if we take out more turf than we've already allocated through the first SNWA interlocal that you passed a couple meetings ago, we would be watering dirt or rock, which we don't want to do. So with the irrigation upgrade, we would plan further turf removal, and we need to get to the 4 acre-feet per irrigated acre a year. So that's our goal, and with the irrigation system, we'll be looking at saving about 30% of the water usage, and that'll play into a part with additional turf removal, which will be planned with the design of the irrigation system.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yeah, just a question. We do receive some rebate for that, right? So a portion of the money will be at least coming back in some fashion?
Yes, we're going to be overseeing as turf is removed. We're going to be submitting the paperwork to SNWA and getting some rebate from that. So that will assist in this project.
Okay, great. And then also, I know that I've talked about just a small concern about these golf courses are definitely city assets, and currently there's the project to take the turf out of this one, possible track 350 to be built, and then, you know, they were looking at RV. That really pretty much sums up every inch of that golf course that you could do any kind of building, removal, which I think in turn, if we're not careful how we look at that, could cause our bottom line to suffer, and I think we want to be continuing in the direction we're continuing. I mean, they're really doing well. They're exceeding expectation as far as incoming, and I can see that could be problematic if we did it all at once.
Yeah, we'll definitely be coordinating the projects so that they're not all happening at once, especially for the homeowners in the area. That would be a little messy, and we've talked with Andy Shaper, who's the manager of the golf courses, and we would be looking at closing during the hotter months so that we could have the course open for the busier times, since they are operating in the green. So
I would just make note that when we say operating in the green, that's operation and maintenance. That doesn't include any type of work like this. This is just more millions of dollars that are going into those courses that they're nowhere close to a point where they're generating money that pays for this type of work to be done, upgrades, major maintenance projects, capital projects, which we're discussing here. They've just broken even on operation and maintenance over the past year. Is that correct?
yeah, the operation budget is paying for itself.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just add this one thing. Obviously, we need to do whatever we can to mitigate the impact on our water supply that these golf courses have, because it is great. And so as long as we are operating and maintaining them, we need to be heading in this direction. That being said, just as Councilmember Jorgensen, described, these golf courses are integrated very well into our community. However, we really do need to be having conversations and forward thinking about, what is the longevity down the line in the future for our golf courses. If we're not already at the point now, when will we find that point or decide that we are at the point when it is no longer appropriate to be watering the golf courses? We need to at least be having those conversations, as long as we are committing, these types of funds to these projects, so that we can be proactive in this decision-making process and not reactive. So, like I said, we do need to be heading forward, though, in this direction as long as we are operating these golf courses.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone wishing to make a motion on Resolution 7528?
Yes. I move to accept resolution number 7528.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Ms. Pelletier. All right, we will take a 15-minute break and resume at 6:55. Madam City Clerk, are you ready? All right. All right. I will call the meeting back to order. We can dispose of the feedback on the mics. And we are on to item number 11, matters pertaining to Titles 3 and 11. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, again, it'll be Michael Mays, Community Development Director, going through the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment.
Good evening again. What I'd like to do with this presentation is highlight a couple of different aspects of the proposed ordinance. First, summarize how we got here with the council considering the amendments to Title III and to Title 11 of the City Code. And then to also provide a high-level overview of the proposed changes to the Historic Preservation Ordinance. So this is a map showing the existing boundaries of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. I'm sorry, of the Historic Preservation District. So I want to kind of highlight how we got here by starting with the 2025 Strategic Plan. In that plan that was adopted in 2019, one of the action items and goals was specific toward historic preservation and addressed updating the existing ordinance to better reflect the community's goals as it related to historic preservation efforts. In October of 2020, the City Council approved Resolution 7167, which established the Boulder City Historic Preservation Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee. They're tasked to prepare a proposed draft ordinance for City Council consideration. It constituted 2 members of the Historic Preservation Committee and 2 members of the City Council. In January of 2021, City contracted with Northwind Resource Consulting to survey all of the properties within the historic district. This had last been done in 1982 and was the basis for the creation of the original historic district and the nomination to the National Register of that district. As part of their survey efforts, Northwind determined that 43% of the properties within the historic district were still contributing to the historic district, as opposed to 82% back in 1982. And I'm going to explain what a contributing property is here in a second. The ad hoc committee met for 6 meetings between 2020 and 2022. And then, in addition, the ad hoc committee held 2 workshops with the community in June of 2021 to discuss the proposed draft ordinance. In August of 2021, the City Council adopted Resolution 7323, which adopted the city's historic preservation plan. Just like the strategic plan, it had action items, and several of them specifically were focused on changes to the existing historic preservation ordinance. And that's been part of the focus of updating the ordinance to follow those action items. In March of 2022, the ad hoc committee completed their work and recommended a draft ordinance to the city council, largely following what we refer to as the SHPO model ordinance, SHPO being the State Historic Preservation Office. And that was advanced to the council in May of 2022. City Council directed staff to begin the text amendment process to amend Title 11, Chapter 27 of the City Code, which addresses historic preservation. So let's talk about the ordinance in summary. Before I talk about the proposed ordinance, it's important to highlight the current ordinance that's been in place for approximately 15 years. The current ordinance provides for the creation of new historic districts. Current ordinance has a 45-day delay on demolitions within the historic district. And the current ordinance requires that certain proposed improvements to properties within the historic district be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Committee. But the important consideration there is that the committee's feedback is advisory only. So what are the proposed changes to Title 11? It would require commission and/or staff review based on whether the property is contributing or non-contributing. This is tied to a certificate of appropriateness approval matrix, and as part of your consideration tonight, there are three sections, three different elements to your consideration. Obviously, first, the public hearing, then the proposed bill that would amend Title 11 and Title 3 to change the ordinance, and then a separate resolution considering a proposed decision matrix, which I'll describe in greater detail here in a second. The decisions of the proposed Historic Preservation Commission would be final unless appealed to the City Council. And so this is the major distinction with the existing ordinance. So this is an example of the proposed matrix that is being considered by the City Council tonight. What this matrix does is it lays out the different proposed improvements and determines, based on whether they're contributing or non-contributing properties to the historic district, whether they're reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission or reviewed at a staff level. And you'll see, based on the proposed matrix that is for your consideration, that a majority of the activities related to non-contributing properties would be reviewed by staff, which would include Northwind Consulting Resources, and most of the activities related to contributing properties would be reviewed by the commission. So, let's describe what a contributing property is. A contributing property is a property that was constructed between 1930 and 1945. This is the area of significance. It's the basis for the creation of the historic district and the nomination to the National Register. And these properties have preserved the architectural integrity during that time, and so in summary, they are largely similar to what they looked like when they were constructed during that time period. What are non-contributing properties? I like to put these into three categories. The first are properties that were also built during the period of 1930 to 1945, but there have been several changes made to them since then. Modification of windows, additions added, modification to the roof line. And so because of significant changes to those properties, they're no longer contributing to the historic district. any property that was built after 1945 also is not contributing and can never contribute to the historic district because it wasn't built during that time period, which is the basis of the historic district. Again, 1930 to 1945. And then certainly any home built today would never contribute to the historic district. So let's talk about how this ordinance would regulate contributing properties. Modifications to the exterior of the building that can be seen from the street, and let me clarify the street, the front and side streets, but not alleys. The ordinance explicitly excludes that, would require review and approval by the Historic Preservation Commission. And in some rare instances, staff, again, depending on the proposed improvement, going back to the decision matrix. Modifications to the interior of these buildings, structures, and ordinary maintenance that doesn't require building permits will not be reviewed through this process. The intent with the Historic Preservation Ordinance is to protect the character and the architectural integrity of the properties from the street view. So obviously anything that's done in the interior is not impacting that and is not reviewed through this process. Obviously, normal building permits and that process would apply, but not review by staff or the Historic Preservation Commission related to its contributing or non-contributing status. Also, accessory buildings that again can be seen from the street would require that review. Demolition of contributing structures or the partial demolition would require review by the Historic Preservation Commission. It's also important to point out that in this ordinance, any decision made by the Historic Preservation Commission can be appealed to the City Council. With non-contributing, as I noted with the decision matrix as proposed and for your consideration tonight, most of the major modifications, again, to the structures as seen from the street would be reviewed by staff and not the commission under that proposed matrix. But demolition of non-contributing properties would be reviewed by the commission. Demolition of a portion of a non-contributing property would only require staff review, and structures built after 1945 and non-contributing properties would not be following the same restrictions and through the guidelines as a contributing property would, because as our historic preservation consultant had noted, these properties are no longer contributing to the district, and so you wouldn't hold them to the same standards. Some of the other elements of the proposed ordinance for your consideration. Historic district exterior changes and demolition would require commission staff approval. This ordinance provides for the creation of new historic districts subject to city council approval. It provides maintenance standards for structures within the historic district, and it also provides a mechanism for relief from the demolition requirements and review. What the ordinance doesn't do, and it's important to reemphasize this, is again, any work not seen from the street. So even if you're putting an addition on either a contributing or non-contributing property and it's in the backyard and cannot be seen from the street, it would not be reviewed through this process. Because again, it's not impacting the historic character of that neighborhood. And again, interior remodels would not be reviewed through this process, and all ordinary maintenance is exempted. And so for your consideration, again tonight, you have before you the public hearing related to the proposed text amendment, consideration of Bill 1921, which would amend Titles 11 and 3 of the City Code, and then consideration of Resolution 7529, which would adopt the decision matrix, which is tied to the bill and ordinance. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Again, there will be a public hearing on this, so if council members do have any specific questions regarding this, it would be the time for that. However, we should hold our other questions and opinions for following the public hearing. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Thank you, yes. On page 15, it talks about minimum maintenance standards, and in there it says, no owner or person with an interest in real property designated as a historic property shall permit the property to fall into serious state of disrepair. Is the definition of a historic property one that is just in that district, or is it a contributing property, or how does that work?
As defined in the ordinance, it would be all the structures within the historic district.
So both contributing and non-contributing
That is
would
correct.
be held to these minimum maintenance standards?
That is correct, as proposed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Question I have regarding those maintenance standards is, how does that differ from other areas of town? You know, there are codes that we have in place regarding maintenance of properties that cover the entire city at this time. Is that correct?
They are, but they're not nearly as specific as these contemplated within this proposed ordinance.
How many of those code violations for that type of infraction do you believe are received each year?
For that type of infraction, meaning
Or
property
exist-
maintenance?
The existing, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I would have to confer with our code enforcement officer to determine that delineation.
All right. All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Mays. With that, we will open the public hearing on this. Is there anyone present that would like to speak during the public hearing regarding this ordinance? Thank you. If you'd state your name and record your name there.
Sure,
Hopefully
my
it's
name's
still there.
Michael Delormier. Record it. Well, let's see. I live in the historic district. I have a house there, and I'm partially worried about harsh penalties. I'm worried about being able to maintain the house, and yeah, the penalties sound pretty harsh for this. It's $500 per item per day and a misdemeanor per item. It doesn't seem that, well, the houses around there are around my house are pretty nice. I mean, it's they're cute houses, and it seems like people are maintaining them well for the most part, and so it doesn't seem like this sort of thing is necessary. I also think that for the purpose of attracting people to the town, for tourism, say, or visitors, it seems like the people with the most stake in that are people who own businesses and run businesses here. And like, it seems like most of the talk is about restrictions on what you can do with your house, or that's a big part of it. And I mean, there's not like, it doesn't seem like there's much evidence from business owners that it would be beneficial for them, for like restaurants or bars, for people visiting. that is it going to attract more people if we have this ordinance? And so you heard my wife speak before, and we both care about this a lot because we had a lot of trouble in the past trying to repair our house. We were blocked by very strict regulations preventing us from repairing it. Ironically, they were telling us that we had to repair it, but this sort of thing seems like, once you go overboard, you get in all sorts of trouble trying to do basic things. So, yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak for the public hearing? Yes, sir, Mr. Turner, if you would state your name and write your name on the sign-in sheet.
All righty. Larry Turner. I own a home on Denver Street. And when we bought the home, the front porch had been enclosed with storefront. The original railings were removed. The beautiful brick was painted white. So we turned it back to its original condition, and it's contributing. And we didn't really need anyone to force us to do that. We are for preservation. I'm against this ordinance. I don't want to be separated out as the person who can't get a building permit, or heaven forbid we run out of money and we fall into disrepair and we have to come before council and be fined on a daily basis. That's not friendly Boulder City. I also, there's a lot of objections. I object to almost everything, but I asked a specific question about non-contributing. We do have a house on Denver that we're planning to remodel for my other son, and it's non-contributing. I asked specifically, what are the limitations? What are the non-contributing limitations? And I was told that'll be determined by staff on a case-by-case basis. And I don't have much confidence there. When we moved into the home we're in now, I got an unsolicited letter from staff advising me that my front yard should be totally grass. My front yard is 10,000 square feet, and I was advised to make it totally grass. This is at a time when the Las Vegas Valley Water District was offering you cash if you would tear out your grass, and it's just gotten worse. Recently, we were selling a house in the historic district. The lady was worried about replacing the windows. She was advised by staff all the things she couldn't do, but then you can do it if you get approval, but it's recommended that the windows be wood. So I called Pella and Milgard and Anderson, and no one makes wood windows for the desert. So that staff recommendation was totally without any merit. And I'm sure that's not even a recommendation that anyone would approve other than this particular staff person. We hear a lot about we need this kind of ordinance because the hospital got torn down and that we can't allow that to happen again. Well, maybe what you don't know is my son and I had that building in escrow probably 12 years ago. And the only restriction on us buying it in our contract was approval from the city for zoning for what we wanted to do. We wanted to put in a bed and breakfast with some spa opportunities, commercial space for maybe hair, massage, that sort of thing, the normal thing you would expect to see in a nice bed and breakfast. We were told in no uncertain terms by staff that they would strongly object to any commercial use on that property. The underlying zoning for that gigantic building on that huge piece of property was one single-family residence. Everything that had been done on that property had just been done under a conditional use permit. And we were discouraged very strongly that we would not get any approval for anything commercial in that area. We would be put down because it's in a residential area. That could be a beautiful bed and breakfast today. We spent 2 months crawling through that building. That building really had no alternative. You either had to spend a ton of money or tear it down. The electrical system was a rat's nest. It was a fire hazard. All of the AC units were trashed. All of the ductwork in the attics had been torn apart by pigeons. It was a pigeon coop up in that area. The building had gone into serious disrepair. And the fact that it got torn down, to me, is just a result of staff being unreasonable. I think a bed and breakfast would have been perfect there. I would not like to see this ordinance passed and these restrictions put on my home. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? All right, we will take anyone wishing to call in at this time. Phone number is 702-589-9629. Again, this is a public hearing regarding the proposed ordinance for the historic preservation. This is a public hearing regarding the ordinance for historic preservation. Anyone wishing to call in, the number 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails received specific for the public hearing?
All of the emails received were read into the record during public comment.
Thank you. Hearing no others, we will close the public comment period then. I would like to begin with what is being considered here is a zoning classification. I think Mr. Mays had spelled that out. Mr. Mays, is there anything further that you wanted to provide?
Nothing further, can just answer any questions.
All right, thank you. The idea that zoning and planning guidelines are new to Boulder City simply belies the history of this community. The planning and adherence to guidelines is what has brought us the wonderful town we live in today. Boulder City was a master plan community built to serve the interests of the citizens here as well as become a home of Hoover Dam. It was certainly not a place where anything anyone wanted to do had to be accepted by everyone else. That is not the case with zoning requirements that already apply to all areas of the city, such as setbacks, height of buildings, those type of requirements. We do have zoning laws here. They specify certain areas of town where certain types of building are permitted and others are not. It is certainly not the case that the number of laws that are enacted for the betterment of the residents here has been different in the past, because we've always had these laws since Boulder City was incorporated. Proper planning with a focus on the long-term prosperity of the community has been a guiding star for this community from the very beginning. There's a balancing of interests, of course, that needs to be considered. Financial grant programs have already been implemented to assist both homeowners and business owners with maintaining the architecture that this ordinance proposes to do. The benefit that is recognized is preservation for the community that the community in survey after workshop has indicated that they desire to have here in Boulder City. The development of the proposed ordinance has been a years-long effort, and as Mr. Mays had indicated earlier, is based on the State Historic Preservation Office Model Ordinance. It is not something that has simply been made up. It is based on a set of standards that are developed at the national level, and those are then available for adoption by communities and also by state historic preservation offices, which every state in America has, and every state in America has historic districts within that state. I did attend the Planning Commission meeting regarding this matter that was held on August 31st. I must say that after having seen the comments and the discussion that occurred there, it's often a wonder to me how some of the planning commissioners approach the work they volunteered to do. And I certainly appreciate the efforts that they put into the volunteer work. But when an issue such as this is submitted for consideration, it is done so with materials and policy decisions that have been approved and established by the City Council. Those being things like the master plan, the strategic plan, the historic preservation plan, all of those things that have been already put in place. And when I hear some of the comments that get made by members of the commission that, well, nobody can tell anyone what to do, I question why they come to a conclusion like that when the very fact that they are serving on a planning commission is to do just that, to follow those guidelines and establish procedures that the city has, and not to simply offer up opinions on, well, I don't want anybody to do anything here in Boulder City. We would not have the community we have today if we had followed those types of decisions in the past. If commissioners disagree with the established plans of the city, they should make recommendations for change. They should not believe they have the authority to do so on their own or inject policies that are new and have not been properly vetted in any given time when they consider matters like this. The statement by Commissioner Lorene Crum that members of the ad hoc committee reviewing the ordinance did not include residents of the historic district is false. There were members that were residents of the historic district. There are members of this council, a member that has been a resident, and I don't know that that's a prerequisite for being able to discuss these things and review the requirements that might be needed. Commissioner Lassoff has made a comment in the past about, these types of ordinance would prohibit people from changing the doorknobs on the kitchen cabinets in their homes. I know he disputes that, but I heard it and many others heard it. Similarly, I've heard comments made by Commissioner Lassoff about cave people here in Boulder City, that if you're a cave person, you're a citizen against virtually everything. It's not productive to have those types of conversations when we talk about such an important subject as historic preservation. I know it's been said here this evening, I certainly had heard it from the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, that we've not reached out to everyone. As Mr. Mays had indicated, there were half a dozen meetings of the ad hoc committee. There have been letters sent to every property owner. I myself and others went out a month ago putting door hangers on people's doors to let them know about this. We have had surveys that have received over 800 responses from community members This has been a multi-year process to get where we're at. There have been stories in the paper, there have been announcements on the city website, notices in the utility billings. This has been put out to the community in ways that I've never seen any project put out to the community before, and we have had responses from people. At least, as I mentioned, at least a dozen public meetings have been held, workshops have been held. When I hear the comments about, well, people haven't known, people didn't know what was happening, you know, I do understand. Everyone's busy with their lives and they can't always know everything that may be happening. But that certainly has not been the case here. I know we have people that have commented during the public comment sessions, that they're new here. That happens. You move to a new area, some things might be different there. When I look at an example like the Boulder Dam Hotel and the condition that that was in, that was almost a goner. One of the people speaking earlier in the public hearing mentioned the old hospital, the original hospital. Okay? The old hospital is gone. The Boulder Dam Hotel, fortunately, was resurrected, but it was so from a great deal of investment by the taxpayers and by private donors into that structure. That structure is now protected because of some of that money that has been put into that building has placed restrictions on what can be done with the building. But that's not the case with other buildings that we have here. I certainly have heard members of the public make comments about the penalties that are within the proposal, and because of that, I worked with the city attorney and have, she was able to produce these amendments that have been made available to members of the city council as well as the public. Regarding the maximum fine that can be assessed each day, that would be reduced to not to exceed $25. That would be up to the decision of the enforcement officer as to whether the amount should be 0 or 25 or 10 or some dollar amount in between. The criminal penalty for misdemeanor was never in that model ordinance from the State Historic Preservation Office. And once again, I am offering an amendment that would remove that language from this. The amount of the penalty for the demolition or partial demolition of a building without the proper authorization was not defined in the draft, and I'm proposing that that be done for $10,000. I know that's a lot of money, but that's why things like demolition need to be severely dissuaded from if someone wants to try and take that action. And lastly, change to the Title III, where there would be potential for 2 non-voting members to be appointed to that commission who meet the criteria that are listed in the Certified Local Government Guidelines. And those 2 non-voting members may not have to be residents of Boulder City, as all of our other commission and committee members are, because we may not be able to find folks who have that background here in Boulder City. We're fortunate we currently have a couple of people on the Preservation Committee that do meet that criteria, but these would be non-voting members who may be interested in giving us their expertise and serving on that commission if it is created. And with that, I will make a motion to approve Bill number 1921 with the amendments I just outlined and have been provided prior to the meeting. I do invite further discussion if someone is willing to second that motion, and we'll consider additional amendments. Is there anyone wishing to second that motion?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Jorgensen.
Yes, thank you. First off, let me start off by saying how thankful I am for the hours that have been put into this. I recognize that there's a lot of city staff time that's gone into this. A lot of volunteer community and committee members have put time and effort into this historic preservation. Now, I'm grateful for this community and understand it has a special story to tell. I mean, we're lucky, right? Of all cities, here we have the dam. And this is the city that built the dam, or actually, we're the city that exists because the dam was built. And that's a unique place in history, and that's a story that needs to be told. Now, how we tell that story is important, and how we make that story told to the people who visit. Because really, honestly, if people who visit don't come and actually see these homes or visit or see the story that we're telling, it falls on deaf ears. When my girls were young, I bought them a book called The Care and Keeping of Yourself. And I was thinking about the care and keeping of Boulder City, that we, as we sit up here today, have been issued by the community to care and keep for Boulder City. And how we do that is important. And so we look at historic preservation. It's a large umbrella. It's a large umbrella in a small city here. We have 517 either residents or buildings that fall under that umbrella. And so I've really been looking at this. I've had emails, I've had people who've called me, I've had people who have discussed this, and I take seriously the opportunity to look at how Boulder City cares about itself. And when I ran, I did run with historic preservation meaning something to me. It does mean something to me. It is important. And I would echo Mr. Goya's words that the most important thing here is that we have something that's viable, that isn't going to just be have wasted time or be changed in the future. We need something that actually is going to last and last through the test of time, I guess is what we want to say. And to do that, I look at it from two perspectives. First, the perspective of helping our community to be able to maintain its history, and secondly, the perspective of individuals who own these residences or these businesses, have purchased it with their hard-earned money, and how we protect their freedoms. Quite honestly, this is the American dream, to own a home. And when you own a home, you don't assume that you're going to be told how to maintain your home beyond the minimum maintenance that maybe a city has. And so I'd like to preface a little bit of what I've said, or go with the preface that I just had, with some of the things that I know are going to come from what I'm saying right now. First off, I feel like this has been done quickly, and I will get the argument, and I know I will, that this has been around since the 80s. I'm well aware this has been around since the 80s. I'm well aware that our contributing homes are less and they have decreased. I don't want fear to be the factor with how we make decisions in our city, that we might lose another home if we don't make this decision tonight. I like the recommendation from the Planning Commission to go back and re-look at this. Some of these pieces are good. They're excellent, actually. But we have people in this community who own these homes. We've already talked about utilities and different things, and how we have people on fixed incomes that live here. And so we've got to keep our utilities low. Well, what if they live in one of these homes and they don't have the money to maintain it at the level we require? And then we start assessing fines. And they didn't have the money to fix it up, and now they don't have the money. It seems to me that this is overreaching into the pocketbooks of people who may not be able to afford this. I know that I went back and watched the Planning Commission meeting. I wanted to see how they got to the decision of denying this 7-0 with the recommendation that the City Council directs staff to rewrite or relook at the ordinance. So how did they get to that? And I think part of it came from the comments from the people. I mean, one person commenting that it's going to cost $20,000 to replace 3 windows to come back up to contributing. That's excessive when you consider that these homes are 750 square feet. This is not a giant home that you're replacing windows. Many of these homes since the 80s have changed ownership. Many of these homes in the last 5 years have changed ownership. We mentioned someone on the council who once lived in one and has since sold it and has changed ownership. That's how that goes. But those who have been in there had no idea that they were going to be into almost, and I know I'm gonna receive a little flack for this too, almost like a city-run HOA, where we are telling them, I live in an HOA, I knew what I was getting myself into. But they don't. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And would they have? I've been hearing some of these concerns, they're valid, and we have had zoning laws in the past, but from the very beginning, these are being sprung on people, and I'm concerned. So some of the reasons that I say that I think this is done fast. First off, we have recommendations up here to change the penalties phase. None of the communications sent home when we did an overview where it said, how will this affect me, had anything to deal with the penalties. I didn't see it'll affect me that if I'm not up to this standard, that it's gonna cost me $500 a day every calendar day. None of that was in there, because I guarantee you, if someone would have seen that, they would have said, I'm gonna be at that meeting, because there is no way that I want to fall into a situation where that could be the consequence at my house. So there's that, and the last statement under penalties says that including acquisition of property by the city, we don't need another building to maintain. We don't need to acquire someone's home. We don't need to make someone homeless because we don't think that they're living up to what we think their home should be. I just don't find that that's good business for a city. I appreciate that the mayor has made some attempts at going through and making this less onerous on the people who own these homes, but nonetheless, again, it's not been vetted. When we started our vetting process, it started in March of 2020. That's the month the whole world shut down. Let's remember that. And that was our first workshop. Then the next workshop happened in June of 2021. We're still wearing masks. People are worrying about things that don't include this. The things they're worrying about are their jobs. Will they have enough money? Have their loved ones passed on? Will they become seriously ill and die? So I think we vetted it at a time which is unprecedented in the history of the world, even, almost. And so it needs more time. And I know that it's gonna come back. We've been doing this since the 80s. It's had nothing but time. But I think it's important, if we're gonna make these requirements, that we get more input from the actual people we're gonna be requiring it from. Are we afraid to have each of them vote? Where's their voice in this? We're not afraid up here to vote for them, but where's their voice? And I know that we sent home things that led them to a website, but then one of the people who I talked to said they didn't have internet access. Well, what happens with that? Then they can't go there and they can't see it, so they don't know what they're getting into. I recognize there's been a lot of work put into this. I recognize that there is much that's good. In fact, I wrote down, I do think the demolition portion of this could be healthy and good. I do think that there needs to be some time to look at things like that. My concerns and reasons that I feel like it needs more looking at are the fines, the misdemeanor. I just can't even imagine that. The fact that they struggle to get contractors and it costs $20,000 to do windows. I think this needs more time. I think we should listen to the council from the Planning Commission to look at it and to go over it. And most importantly, I think we need to pass something that lasts and not let fear make us pass something that could get changed in the future.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges.
Yeah, I don't own a house in the historic district now. I did sell the house, and it was a contributing house, and it had a lovely addition in the back, a master bedroom suite, which was built in 1996, I believe. We painted, we changed kitchen counters, put up different curtains, did a whole lot to it, and it never changed the fact that it was a contributing house. So I just wanted to I do support this, and I support this, first of all, I lived across the street from the hospital, and I watched that building come down, and I knew all of the controversy over it, and what had been and what it could be and all of that, but I did watch it be taken down tile by tile. I also heard about one of the members of our community who bought a building that had previously been a restaurant, the Browder Building, and because of a dispute with the city, had it been able to get a 45-day demolition permit for that building and was threatening to tear it down and would have been able to do that. So the discussion about being told what to do, I mean, I've looked up a number of times the requirements for building additions on a house, building fences and retaining walls. There are building codes, fire codes, mechanical codes, plumbing codes, energy codes, fire codes, anything you want to do to your house for the most part, anything that would require a permit has certain codes and ordinances behind it. This is one that I ran on 3.5 years ago. What people told me when I went door to door, one of their complaints was we had a historic preservation ordinance that had no teeth. It was if it suits your fancy, you could, you might, if you want to, but there was nothing in it that encouraged people beyond just, come on, it's a great idea, to be mindful, and more than mindful, especially if they had a contributing property here in Boulder City. And we're talking about the facade. We're not talking about interior work, which you still need to get certain permits for if you do in certain kind. If you were going to rewire your house, you would have to be permitted and have a licensed contractor. But it wouldn't affect, you wouldn't have to take it to the Historic Preservation Committee because that's not part of the exterior of the house. I want to thank the mayor for changing that. I heard people say $500 fine. Now this is for making alterations without having a certificate of appropriateness for $25 for an offense and not $500. But we're also saying any person who partially or completely demolishes a structure listed in the historic property register without such certificate of appropriateness, there should be a penalty for that. There are people who start projects and walk away. There are houses in the historic district that have been not cared for, and there are ones where nobody's living in them and they're not cared for. And I believe that there needs to be a historic preservation ordinance that encourages people to maintain the integrity of their homes here. And most people do the right thing. But there's got to be direction for people who want to do it but have to understand there are restrictions. It's not an HOA. It's just like saying that if I wanted to rewire my house, is it an HOA? That says that I have to get a permit and I have to hire a licensed contractor. we did stuff to our side yard. That wasn't obvious, that wasn't part of whether we're contributing or not, but we had to hire a licensed contractor. So the fact that there's an appeals process, the fact that for the most part, it's not saying you're gonna, if you paint the inside of your house or you do stuff inside, that somebody's going to come and turn you in. It has nothing to do with what you do inside the house, behind the house. It has to do with the facade of maintaining the integrity of our historic district. And I'll finish this. It was something I promised to stand behind when I first sat down in this seat. And I'm not gonna back down from that now because I feel it's that important. Like I said, you know, for someone to be able to buy a building in our downtown area and then be able to use the threat of demolition to hold over somebody's head. So that's about it. And I do support the changes in the amendment for $25 and $10,000, and also if that there may need to be non-voting members on the committee because there may be experts that we could bring in as consultants and who could be part of the committee, but ex officio. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I think over the last 3 years, I have probably said just about everything that I can with regards to historic preservation. Has likely already been set up here. So I will add this, though. I would like to thank staff, the Historic Preservation Committee, the past members of the Ad Hoc Committee, for all of the work that they have put into this. I think that all of you should be very proud of all the time, energy, effort, resources that you have all dedicated over the years to this. I don't think that we have ever once asked this much of a single item that has come before us. And so for that, I would like to thank each and every one of you. I also think it's important to thank the community members who did participate in our town halls, our surveys, our forums, our public meetings, or just simply reaching out. You know, I have spent hours discussing this item with a number of residents, and I just want them to know that their input, whether it was in support or opposition, has guided this process, absolutely. So I think that is very important to insist and instill and letting them know that this has not been done in a vacuum. This has been done with more input and more feedback than I have ever received on a single agenda item. I mean, we pass budgets with crickets, but with this is where people have come out and spoken. With regards to the bill before us, there is a motion here on the table with regards to 1127.8 subsection A1. Where it states, any person violating any of the provisions of this chapter shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Every calendar day the violation of this chapter exists constitutes a separate offense. I am in favor of striking that. I think that is good for us to strike. With regards to the second line there, any person making an alteration without a certificate of appropriateness as required by this chapter may be fined a civil fine not to exceed, and I do agree with reducing that amount to $25 as opposed to $500 for these offenses. And then with regards to any person who partially or completely demolishes a structure listed on the historic property registered without a certificate of appropriateness may be subject to an administrative penalty. I did just want to ask the city attorney, when we are determining a penalty like this, how do we know where we should be setting that so that we are not being excessive or being too lenient with a fine like that?
The amount to assess this administrative penalty is really a policy decision. There's been jurisdictions like Laguna Beach that has set it as high as $100,000, but most that have this penalty, not all jurisdictions with historic preservation ordinances have an administrative fine for demolition, but those that do, the typical fine that I have seen in the few ordinances I've reviewed was $10,000. Up to $10,000, I should say.
Okay. In that case, I would think that $10,000 is reasonable. I mean, we are talking about the demolition of a property on the historic property register without approval, of which I think it's important to note that this bill does allow for exemptions so that it can be approved if it is necessitates that need. All of these, everything in here can be appealed to the city council. The comment was made, where, are we afraid of people voting? Are we afraid of any of this? And no, of course we're not. But we were all here appointed to weigh in on these very things. The people voted for us to make these decisions, and for us to listen to them, and for us to take into account all of those things. And here we are, and they can appeal, any of these decisions that might be disagreed with to the council, to those members that they voted in. And so with that, I am in favor of this, with the inclusion of striking 1127.8 subsection A1, everything that has been presented here, and of course including non-voting members that may allow us some expert opinion that, again, would not have voting authority on that commission.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Fox?
Yeah, thank you guys for putting in the time and effort into this. I think Councilmember Jorgensen really nailed it on the head with, state-run HOA and overreach. I do like some of the stuff in here, but the enforcement, the fines, I think that's a little too much. The majority of the people that I've talked to that own property in the historic district aren't for it, and the majority of people that I have talked to that are for it don't live in the historic district. So, I'm going to stand with a lot of the property owners in the historic district that are against it. I think we should go back to the drawing board on some of this stuff. But I really do think it's an overreach, and to fine people every day, whether it's $1 or $25, I think it's just a little too much. So that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Thank you. So, for me, I would like us to have some transparency before we vote on this and send out the matrix that wasn't finished at the time of this and has been available for last month. I would like that to be more available to the public. I would like the changes that the mayor is proposing tonight to be made available before they're voted on, just so that they know what it is that we're voting on. This is different than what they think we're voting on. It's been changed. And so for me, that's what I just wanted to say.
Anyone else? Just in response to some of the comments that have been made earlier, I would point out that, the pandemic and all of that, Mr. Mays had started the conversation out by stating that this originated with the strategic plan that was initially prepared in 2018. Is that correct, Mr. Mays?
Prepared in 2018 with the action items brought before the council in 2019.
Okay. And thank you for that. That included other members of this council. So I think it's important to point out that this is not just some decision of a couple of people. There were other members of council at that time when that plan was developed and put forward. The idea that we have to always wait, 82, folks, okay? 1982 was when this was originally being proposed. And by the way, it was being proposed by residents of this community. It wasn't something that was being brought forward by a member of city council or the city council as a whole. It was the residents expressing the desire to have this type of ordinance in effect. And that has been the case since 1982, that when these begin, it has been because of residents here saying, we need to do something about this situation. I get that we have two new members, less than new at this point, but members of council here who have been here more than a year now, one of whom was actually on the ad hoc committee that was looking at this. I get that, it may seem new to some people, but that's not what I've heard from residents here for decades. And the fact is, this is based on the State Historic Preservation Ordinance. It's not something that we made up or that was conjured out of smoke. It is something that is done on standards that have been in development since the 1960s, and every state in America has a state historic preservation office. That's what this is based on, is their recommendations. So with that, I will, again, we do have a motion on the floor for approval with the amendments that I have proposed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion passes with council members Jorgensen and Fox dissenting. Mr. Mays, thank you. Thank you for the last 2 years, 3 years of all your efforts. That will bring us to item number 11, the...
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
Don't we
excuse me,
vote
you are
on-
correct.
on
We have
C?
one more item
Yes.
here. In addition to, sorry, Mr. Tedder, in addition to the bill, that comes in conjunction with Resolution 7529, which is the Certificate of Appropriateness Approval Matrix. Again, that is referenced within this bill, but requires a separate resolution for approval. Mr. Mays, did you want to make any further comments on that matrix?
Just to reiterate what was part of the presentation, so this decision matrix is separately approved from the ordinance and determines, based on the proposed improvements, whether it is reviewed by the commission or staff.
All
So
right.
that was contained in the resolution. I can answer any questions on that.
Any questions for Mr. Mays regarding the Certificate of Appropriateness matrix? All right, anyone wishing to make a motion then with regard to Resolution 7529?
I'd like to move to accept resolution number 7529.
I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
And we have approval of that resolution with council members Jorgensen and Fox dissenting. Thank you again, Mr. Mays. Now we will move to item number 12.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
before you move on, I'd just like to state that Bill number 1921 will become known as Ordinance number 1686, effective November 3rd, 2022.
Thank you for making it official. Mr. Tedder?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I was so excited to share all of the implementation we've done on the strategic plan. I came up early. Every quarter we do update you on this and the community on the strategic plan and how it's implemented. This plan started in the summer of 19 and is on track to be complete sooner than the deadline, which was slated to be June of 2024. I do anticipate an RFP to be issued for a new strategic plan process in March or April of next year, and intend to start the process for a new strategic plan, incorporating that into the 2023-24 budget process. It's lengthy but meaningful process, and it'll have a really large emphasis on community engagement, as the last one did. Holly, do you mind advancing the slide for me? Well, I'll go ahead verbally. We are inching closer to achieving the 5 goals, achieving prudent financial stewardship with 10 strategies, investment in infrastructure, which is 5 strategies, managing growth and development with 11 strategies, promotion of historic preservation, 8 strategies, and sustaining a high level of public safety services with 7 strategies. So let's take a look at where we stand. So for strategy 2, diversify revenue sources through greater use of grants, self-sustaining funds, and leases. Executive staff worked to develop a grant management policy, so that established a staff-level grant review committee, and that's to ensure that we have the proper amount of match available and that it matches the organizational needs and goals when we're applying for grants. The city also entered into an option and lease with Townsite Solar 2, which will generate $174,000 a year when that's exercised. Moving on to strategy 5, which is support nonprofit and volunteer groups. As you know, the city entered into a lease agreement with the Railroad Museum and also transferred land to the Library District for their use. Investment in infrastructure, with Strategy 1, which is prioritize capital improvement projects to address health and safety while maximizing available funds, and Strategy 3, which is prepare and update source documents to guide and inform the capital improvement plan process. We have moved the CIP coordinator back to the finance department. That's so that we can have a more competitive process among all of the departments when they're submitting for CIP projects, so that it's more representative of all of the organization's needs, and so that can be, that's already happened. And then with Strategy 2, which is maximize the use of outside funding sources for infrastructure, staff did secure Clark County Regional Flood Control District funding for 3 major projects, including the Avenue I Storm Drain and Wells Drive Levee lining project. Staff has also secured $600,000 from the Southern Nevada Regional Transportation Commission for citywide ADA and safety improvements, which it's a big priority for the community, as we heard at the last council meeting. And engineering staff does continue to advertise the water service replacement projects, which will be reimbursed with the ARPA funds. So manage growth and development. This goal only has one strategy left to complete, and that's Strategy 8, which is create development standards for business corridors to help acknowledge the city's history. The Historic Preservation Committee is currently reviewing updates to the existing design guidelines, including the downtown area, and Strategy 9 closed out in June when the City Council adopted the wayfinding plan. Staff is preparing the financial year 24 budget proposals to implement those plan recommendations, and as always, the council will have input on the design and look and feel of how that project moves forward. Promote historic preservation. So this slide is now out of date. So you considered and did approve that amendment to the historic preservation text amendment tonight, and that's Strategy 4. And then with Strategy 8, which is identify historic buildings to repurpose and reuse as appropriate for a given area, the city was informed that the grant for the preservation of the historic water filtration plant has been tentatively approved, and the formal agreement between the city and SHPO will be considered by the council later this year. We've also promoted grant programs to all the property owners within the historic district, as Mr. Mays mentioned earlier. So with sustain a high level of public safety services, we'll start out with Goal 5, the sustain a high level of public safety services. That only has one strategy left to complete, which is Strategy 6, and that's to communicate and celebrate the low crime rate and other service excellence. So with the police department, among the news releases and social media updates, we did issue the news release on Commander Johnson's completion of the FBI Academy for Law Enforcement Leadership, which is a really big deal in the law enforcement community, and really proud that he was able to go through that program. And we also have held Coffee with a Cop outreach efforts, and looking forward to the next one with that. So talking about the fire department, they are in the middle of the review for consideration for international accreditation through the Center of Public Safety Excellence, the Commission for Fire Accreditation International. The peer team will be on site for a 4-day review starting October 23rd through the 27th. And if it's successful, the department will have a hearing in Orlando between February 28th and March 3rd of next year for formal approval. There are approximately 310 accredited fire departments out of the nearly 32,000 fire departments in North America. So if we are awarded that designation, we would be among the top tier fire departments in the nation receiving accreditation. So what's next now that this plan is nearing completion? So much has changed in the last 5 years. I do suspect that the next plan will focus on similar issues, but really have a big focus on water conservation and sustainability. Those have been big topics in our conversations over the past year, really. And for now, we'll continue to work on completing the strategies in their entirety. And as I said earlier, we will be looking to issue an RFP for the next strategic plan in early 2023. So I am here to stand for any questions, but as a wrap up, I do encourage everyone to check out the plan as well as many of the updates on bcnb.org/strat plan.
Thank you, Mr. Tedder. Questions or comments? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. All I'll say is keep up the good work. I like to see the things go from orange to yellow, from yellow to green, and we're doing more and more of that. And I look forward to the next process for implementing the strategic plan, because I think there are a lot of things on the horizon that we really do need to be addressing, and I think that that will help guide us from the community. Getting that guidance from the community will really help us move forward as we face some pretty growing challenges here in the future. So
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You know, I believe I'm the only member of this council that was around when this was being developed. I do appreciate very much the efforts of yourself, but all of staff, in really focusing on what was in here, not only the letter of it, but the spirit of what was there. There's been a great deal accomplished here during very difficult times with the pandemic. I think that the next plan, you know, we certainly don't scrap this, but this one's over soon. And what are going to be those next challenges that are coming? Since this one was developed, we've seen changes on the Colorado River that have never occurred before. And how is that going to impact this community, not only with regard to water, but also with energy? So what needs to be done with that? How would it impact any future growth? Those are all questions that Mother Nature is teaching us right now that really were not of front of mind back when this plan was originally developed. So again, appreciate all the efforts of staff working so hard to take care of these priorities.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Thank you. That brings us to our last public comment period. Comments during this period may be on any issue. Each person will have up to 5 minutes to speak. As always, we do ask people to be civil and concise in their comments. We have narrowed the audience considerably here in the council chambers, but if there is anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. All right. We will then go to anyone wishing to call in for the final public comment period. The number is 702-589-9629. This is the final public comment period for the city council meeting. Anyone wishing to call, the phone number 702-589-9629.
Yes, I'd like to make comment.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, this is Judy DeShane. First off, I want to thank the council for passing the historic preservation code. I am very pleased and happy, and I'm sure it's going to help a great deal overall in the city. The other thing I would like to comment on is that I want to remind people that we still owe $20 million plus on a water line that we haven't used and we probably will never be able to use again, or at least not in our lifetimes. but we still are paying on that debt. So I think we need to be careful about what we're paying and what we're going into debt for. Like I say, this 20 million has been sitting there for years, and I do recall it being refinanced, and it should get taken care of. But we do have obligations that nobody ever wants to talk about, although they're out there and still an obligation for us. And one other thing is, I want to know why we never get much of any reports from the council people who are on all these committees. And I recall seeing some Facebook posts about, gee, it's great that the new council kept the mayor from being on any of them, and so they allocated them all out. And we hear from Southern Nevada Health and Southern Nevada Water. And then we have had one on the a report on the regional planning committee. But other than that, we have really not gotten one damn committee report, and I think the council needs to step up and do their job. And thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to call, the number, or the phone line is available, and the number is 702-589-9629. This is the final public comment period for the city council meeting. The phone line is available. The number 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any emails received for the final public comment?
Yes, one.
Please go ahead.
This public comment is provided by Andre Haynes, founder and CEO of the Armed Forces Chamber of Commerce. Everyone is invited to an Armed Forces Chamber business mixer sponsored by Patsy Brown on Wednesday, October 19th at the Boulder City Library. Armed Forces Chamber business mixers sponsored by Patsy Brown include a special presentation, swearing in of new members, updates, contests, plus prizes, and much more. Armed Forces Chamber business mixers sponsored by Patsy Brown feature an hour of networking starting at 3 p.m. and a brief program starting at 4 p.m. Armed Forces Chamber business mixers sponsored by Patsy Brown are open to the public and admission is free. For details, visit armedforceschamber.com. Again, visit armedforceschamber.com.
Was that Armed For? No. Thank you for that. And again, that is a good organization, so. All right, we will close the final public comment period then and go to city council reports. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. This month, the Southern Nevada Water Authority meeting will not be held as is usual. It is usually every other month. Southern Nevada Health District meeting will be held. I will like to say that I attended, since our last meeting, Art in the Park. We also had National Night Out. There was the pancake breakfast at the firehouse. So a lot of great community events. It's finally starting to cool down. I'm glad to see everybody out and about. I would like to note that in speaking with and seeing a lot of residents, I know, Mayor, you have mentioned concern about, school zones and districts. One area that has been brought to my attention in general is the Adams and Buchanan intersection. That is an area where there are children who is just outside of the school zone district, and, that is also an area where the speed limit's 35 miles per hour. So I just, keep an eye out there, and I hope that we as a city can maybe prioritize addressing that issue here coming up.
Thank you. Councilmember Fox? Thank you. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Thank you. I know that it was already reported that I had a chance to sit on interviews for the associate superintendent out at Clark County School District. That was on Friday. That was a nice experience to be able to be in the room with people who were looking for positions pretty high up in Clark County School District. Also wanted to report that I did attend the historic Boulder Dam Hotel board meeting, in which they reported that the tourism that they're bringing in with buses and tours has increased even more. So daily, they have 4 or 5 buses that come in and bring people in. And that's great for our city. It's great to share the story. I appreciate the effort and energy they go to collecting the artifacts and the paperwork that we have. I mean, they got 800 new things last year given to them from people. So they really are collecting and have amassed quite a collection.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, I'll try to be thorough. SNRPC has not had a meeting recently. RTC, I did go to the last meeting, and I'll be going again on Thursday. Usually we have somewhere around 49 items on the agenda that are under the consent agenda. They mostly have to do with funding projects throughout the city on streets. We also discuss issues like driver and passenger safety on buses and the kinds of buses they're going to buy. Debt Management Commission, I attended. We approved a $70 million bond for the city of Las Vegas in order to do some infrastructure work. And I also attended 2 meetings of the All-In Government and Agency Roundup, which is very interesting because they're talking about a climate collaborative throughout the city, bringing in members from all of the entities of the city, the individual municipalities, and so on. But there are a lot of people very concerned about the climate and what are we going to do about it, mitigation and adaptation to issues, education, and so on. So that was very fascinating. And finally, as usual, emergency aid. If you need assistance with rent or utilities and due to an emergency, please contact them. Also, if you need food, they have a very well supplied pantry. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I did attend the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority meeting this morning. We only had a couple of items on the agenda. There was a presentation regarding new marketing strategies that will be starting soon. The theme was that with the pandemic and all that we've been through, we've already talked about, some revenge vacations, they call them. These were going to be me vacations and leave the kids at home. I know that might sound a little bad, but one of the commercials they had, they were all very good, very clever commercials, all tongue-in-cheek. But one was a father reading a bedtime story to his 4-year-old son, telling him about all of the broccoli things that they had here in Las Vegas. You had broccoli for breakfast, you had unseasoned broccoli for lunch, you had broccoli milkshakes, and the little boy finally says, "Daddy, I don't want to go to Las Vegas." And the father goes, "Yes!" So they're a little off tilt as far, but again, the idea of LVCVA, they want to be cutting edge. They are cutting edge. They have an excellent staff there for their marketing and all of that. We continue to see improvements with visitation. That's a great thing. The dollars per room, the dollars gambled per room rented remains at very good levels, but we know that there may be some things on the horizon. They're definitely making moves to make sure that business stays good in Las Vegas. Councilmember Adams had mentioned, slow down around the schools, folks. Those kids are not always looking for your car, so be careful out there. We're getting into the colder weather too, so please consider both a flu shot and the latest COVID vaccine. With that, again, thanks to staff for all of the work they've done, and we are adjourned.